I know people are going to judge me when I say this. I already know. But the morning Ezekiah changed the locks, the morning I stood outside that door with my key, scraping against a cylinder that no longer recognized me, part of me exhaled, like something tight in my chest just loosened. And that part, that quiet, relieved, terrible part, is the one that still follows me around at 2 a.m, when the room gets too dark and too honest. Okay, wait. There's something I haven't told you. Something I've been keeping. Not just from the internet. Not just from my family. From myself, really. In the way you keep a thing by folding it so small you almost forget the shape of it. By the end of this, nothing I said at the beginning is going to mean what you think it means right now. I promise you that. So stay with me. Please. Let me back up. My name isn't important. But I'll give you one anyway, because I hate when people do that mysterious narrator thing and then you're just floating in the story with no anchor. Call me Thessaly. My mother named me after a region in Greece because she'd read something beautiful once and held on to it. She was like that. She collected beautiful things that didn't quite belong to her world and carried them anyway. I got her eyes and her habit. I still do that. Collect things that don't fit. Ezekiah, Ez, I used to call him, back when calling him anything felt like something I wanted to do. Ezekiah and I had been married for 3 years and together for 2 before that. 5 years. You know what 5 years does to a person? It doesn't just pass, it accumulates. It layers over you like sediment, like the kind of geological thing they show in textbooks where each stripe of colour is a different era. By year 5, I was made of him in ways I hadn't consented to. The way I folded laundry. The way I said actually too much in conversations. The slight tilt I'd developed in how I held my head when I was listening, which wasn't my tilt, it was his, absorbed somewhere between year 2 and year 3 without me noticing. And the woman. Her name was Calixta. I need you to hold that name for a second. Calixta. Even her name was beautiful, in a way that felt unfair, felt like the universe taking a side. I found out about Calixta the way most women find out, not with one explosive revelation, but with a slow accumulation of half-seen things that you explain away because the alternative explanation is catastrophic. A name in his phone I didn't recognize, but he said was a work contact. A laugh that happened when I wasn't in the room. The way he started showering as soon as he got home, which I told myself was hygiene, which I told myself was fine, which I told myself about 1100 times before I stopped being able to tell myself anything at all. The lock thing happened on a Tuesday. I want you to understand that I had been at my sister Opaline's apartment because Opaline had just gotten out of the hospital. Not anything serious, a procedure, she was fine, but she needed someone, and I'd been gone 2 nights. 2 nights. I came home with a bag of her leftover soup, because I always bring food when I travel, it's a thing, and I put the key in the lock and the key said no. Just no. The cylinder didn't budge. There was a slight give, like the memory of fitting, and then nothing. I stood there for a while. Longer than made sense, probably, because some part of my nervous system needed the full proof of it before it could move on to the next stage of response. I knocked. I called his name. I called his phone. He didn't answer. I sat down on the little mat outside our door. My door, I mean. The door to the apartment I had helped pick, had helped negotiate the lease on, had hung the small wooden letter holder next to. And I sat there on that mat, and I ate Opaline's leftover soup cold out of the container with a plastic spoon, and I felt the oddest thing, that loosening, that breath, and I hated myself for it. Not then. Then I was mostly just trying to figure out logistics. I called Opaline, who said, come back right now. I called my friend Vesper, who said, burn the building down, which was not useful, but was the most love I'd ever felt from a single sentence. I called my mother, who said she was sorry, in a tone that meant she wasn't entirely surprised, and that hurt in a different way. The particular hurt of being someone that people expect bad things to happen to, even people who love you. I sat in my car outside the building for 45 minutes. I watched the windows. Our bedroom window, second floor, left corner, the one with the slightly broken blinds I'd been meaning to replace for 8 months, had a light on. And then the light went off. And then a different shape moved against the glass. If you've never been on the outside of your own life looking in, I don't know how to explain it to you. It's very quiet. It's the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. I need to tell you something, and I need you to stay. If you're still here, if this is doing something in your chest, hit the subscribe button right now. Just real quick, I'll wait. Because what I'm about to tell you next is the part I have never said out loud to anyone, and I need someone in the room when I say it. Comment something, even just, I'm here. Because the next part is where it gets, okay, I'm going, just be here. I went to a hotel that night. Opaline wanted me back, but I needed to be in a space that was mine and no one else's, and a generic hotel room is as close to that as you can get on short notice. I had my work bag with me from the overnight at Opaline's. I had my laptop, my charger, 2 changes of clothes, my good face wash that I take everywhere. I was materially fine. I ordered room service and watched something on my laptop that I couldn't tell you the title of if you paid me. Some procedural where people kept going into rooms and coming out with answers. And I lay there and I thought about the mochila, the backpack. Okay, see, here's where I have to stop and say something. Remember the bag I mentioned? My work bag from Opaline's. I told you I had my laptop, my charger, 2 changes of clothes, my good face wash. That's true. What I didn't tell you is what else was in that bag. What I'd had in that bag for 3 weeks before any of this happened. I'm getting there. I need to do this in order, or it won't mean the right thing. Ezekiah and I started falling apart. Real falling. Not the small arguments that are just pressure releasing, but actual structural collapse. About 8 months before the lock. I can date it precisely. It was the night of Vesper's birthday dinner, late October, and he got a call in the middle of it and stepped outside. And when he came back, his face was different. Not sad, not worried, just rearranged somehow. Reorganized around something I wasn't part of. I noticed it, and then I put it down, because Vesper was opening presents and laughing that laugh of hers that fills a whole room. And I didn't want to carry something heavy in that moment. But I kept noticing. The way noticing becomes its own kind of work. The way you become a researcher of someone you used to just love. I should tell you about me, actually, because I think people tell these stories and the woman in them gets collapsed into the event. She becomes the person the bad thing happened to, and everything she was before the bad thing gets erased. I am a sound engineer. Was then. Still am now, but differently. I worked with a small production studio in East Atlanta, mostly music, some podcast work, and I was good. Not just good, I was the kind of good that makes people in studios go quiet in a specific way when you're working. The way people go quiet when something is happening that they don't want to interrupt. I had a mentor named Oriandus, which is the kind of name that belongs to exactly one person in the world, and that person was him. And Oriandus had been trying for 2 years to get me to go independent. You're letting Ez's schedule run your schedule, he said to me once, and I told him that wasn't true. And he did the thing he always did, which was just look at me until I heard myself. Doriandus had a point. I was organizing my ambitions around Ezekiah's life. In small ways that I'd convinced myself were partnership. Turning down the LA project because he had a work event. Moving the studio session to accommodate his family visiting. Trimming myself at the edges to fit the frame we'd built together. Which is, I know, it's what people do. It's what love does. But there's a version of it that is love, and a version of it that is slow erasure, and the line between them is nearly invisible from the inside. I started keeping a bag packed 8 months before the lock. Not because I knew. I want to be clear about that. I didn't know about Calixta until much later. The bag wasn't a plan. It was just a way of remembering that I could leave. Like keeping a window unlatched. Not because you intend to jump, but because the closed window was making it hard to breathe. My laptop, my charger, 2 changes of clothes, my good face wash, and a folder. A manila folder with documents, my copies of our lease, my copies of our shared accounts, a small notebook with passwords, 3 months of bank statements in my name only, from the account I'd kept separate, not because I was planning anything, but because Doriandus had said, keep something separate, and I had listened to Doriandus, even when I didn't want to. I had been ready to leave for 8 months before Ezekiah decided to leave for me. And when I sat in that hotel room and thought about the bag and what was in it, and thought about the fact that I had not been blindsided the way you're supposed to be blindsided in these stories, that I had, in some quiet, animal way, been preparing for exactly this, I felt something that took me a long time to name correctly. Not relief at losing him, relief at not being destroyed by it. Relief at the version of me that had packed that bag, that had listened to herself even when listening required no conscious thought, that had moved like water toward exits without ever deciding to run. Part of me had known, and that part had taken care of the rest of me, and I didn't know whether to be grateful or devastated that my own instincts had trusted the ending of my marriage before I had. Can I tell you about the garbage bags? Because this is the thing people always ask about when I tell abbreviated versions of this story, the visual detail that gets them. I went back 2 days later. Ezekiah had finally texted me, long message full of the particular language of someone who has rehearsed their apology so many times it no longer sounds like one. A message full of, I never meant, and you deserve, and I need you to understand, which is a sentence that means the opposite of what it says. I went back not to fight, not even to get my things, just because the lease had my name on it and I needed to understand what we were dealing with legally. And when I turned the corner on the 2nd floor, I saw 3 black garbage bags outside our door. My clothes. He had gone into our closet and taken my things and put them in garbage bags and placed them outside the apartment like refuse, like something to be collected. Calixta's shoes were inside the door. I could see them through the gap. A pair of white sneakers, small, meticulously clean. She was already living in the architecture of my life. Here is what I did not do. I did not scream. I did not pound on the door. I did not perform any of the emotions I had available to me in that moment. And I had many available to me, believe me, they were all right there, crowded together like people waiting in a hallway. I took out my phone. I photographed the bags. I photographed the door. I photographed the shoes. I sent the photographs to the lawyer friend of Opalin's husband, a woman named Tolemaya, who had given me her card at a cookout 6 months earlier, and who had said, call me if you ever need anything, with the kind of directness that meant she'd assessed me and thought I might. I texted Tolemaya the photographs, and she texted back within 4 minutes. Don't touch the bags yet. I'll call you in an hour. I sat down on the floor of the hallway with my back against the wall opposite our door, and I looked at those 3 bags, and I thought about everything I'd been when I moved into that apartment. How certain I'd been. How full. I thought about the night we'd gotten the keys, and how we'd eaten takeout on the floor of the empty living room because we didn't have furniture yet, and it had felt like everything. Like that particular moment was exactly where the whole long story of my life had been pointing. I thought about the morning I'd hung the wooden letter holder by the door. I thought about year 2 and year 3 and the sediment and how you become someone over time without asking to. I took the bags downstairs to my car, all 3. I sat in the driver's seat and breathed for a while. And then I drove to Doriandus's studio, walked in, sat down in the good chair and said, "Tell me about going independent." The next 6 months were not a movie. I want to say that clearly because I've heard people tell their own versions of these stories, and they do this thing where after the humiliation comes this shining, unbroken ascent, and that is not what happened to me. What happened to me was messier and slower, and had more crying in parking lots than I would prefer to admit. Ptolemy was extraordinary. There were conversations about the lease that I won't bore you with, but that I won in ways that felt, at the time, disproportionately important to my sense of still existing. Vesper came over so many times she basically moved in temporarily. Opaline flew down for a weekend, even though she'd just had the procedure and she wasn't supposed to be doing much, and she showed up with snacks and bad movies and did not once say, "I told you so," which is the most loving thing a sibling can do. Ezekiah and Calixta were together for 11 months after he changed the locks. 11 months, not even a year. I found out through the passive surveillance of mutual social media, which I'm not proud of, and also everyone does. By the time they split, I was already renting a studio space. Small, mine, smelled like old carpet and possibility, and had 3 independent clients, one of whom was a producer named Sarah Fontaine, who was genuinely, structurally brilliant, and with whom I would later collaborate on something that got reviewed in a publication I still can't say out loud without feeling slightly outside my own body. I don't know if Calixta knew about me when it started. I made a decision early on to not spend much time in that question, because it is a question that has no good answers. If she knew, it's one kind of sadness. If she didn't, it's another. Neither of them changes what happened to me. Neither of them changes the garbage bags, or the white sneakers, or the hollow key scraping against the changed lock. But here's the thing. Here's the thing I've been circling, and I need to just say it now because we are close to the end, and I won't say it if I don't say it now. I loved him. I want to make sure that's in here. Not the confused loving what he represented, or the loving who he used to be that people offer as retroactive corrections to their own feelings. I loved Ezekiah. Specifically, particularly, the actual him. The way he got weirdly intense about certain topics. The way he always turned the porch light on if I was coming home late, even when I'd told him I didn't need him to. The way he laughed when something surprised him before he'd had time to compose his face. I loved him. And then I stopped. Not because of Calixta, not because of the lock. I stopped before any of that, slowly, in the way that a fire goes out, not with drama, but with just the progressive absence of what was keeping it going. I stopped, and I didn't tell him. I didn't tell myself. I just packed a bag. And this is the thing I haven't said, the thing underneath the thing, the lock, the bags, the shoes. All of that was devastating, yes, and humiliating, yes, and it required a kind of recovery that I'm still doing at the edges. But the secret I kept, even from you, all the way through this story, is that by the morning I stood outside that door, I had already been grieving the marriage for months. The grief I was doing after wasn't for what I lost on that Tuesday. It was the grief of finally being allowed to know what I'd already known. The relief I felt wasn't cruel. It wasn't a deficiency in my love or my humanity. It was the recognition of my own prior grief, given permission to name itself. I had done the mourning quietly, in the middle of the night, in the margins of a life I was still performing as whole. And when the lock confirmed what I'd been silently carrying, part of me exhaled not because it was happy, but because it no longer had to hold the weight of knowing something it wasn't supposed to know yet. That's the thing about the self. It tells you, not in words, in bags packed slowly over 8 months, in accounts kept separate, in cards accepted from strangers at cookouts, in the way you start staying a little later at work, in the way you stop telling him about the small things first, and then the medium things, and then you realize you're living adjacent to someone and calling it a life. I am 26 years old, and I know things about the architecture of endings that I did not ask to know, and would not wish on anyone, and would not trade for anything. I live alone now, in an apartment with better light, and I have a small plant on the windowsill that I have managed to keep alive for 7 months, which is, I promise you, a genuine accomplishment for me, and the metric by which I measure my current stability. The Riandas came by last month for a session, and sat in the good chair, and told me I was the best he'd ever worked with, and he's been working for 30 years, and I cried in the bathroom after he left. Not sad crying, the other kind. Opaline calls on Sundays. Vesper and I have standing Thursday dinner. Tolemaya and I grab coffee occasionally, and she lets me pay now, which she didn't at first, and the transition felt ceremonial in a way neither of us mentioned. The mochila, the bag. I still keep one. Smaller now, updated contents. Not because I expect anything, just because I am a woman who learned early that the self knows things before the mind does, and I have decided to honor that. The wooden letter holder is on my wall here. I took it when I took the bags. It was mine first. Some things you carry not because you need them, but because putting them down would mean agreeing to the version of the story where they were never yours to begin with. I won't agree to that version. I'm not asking you to save me. I'm not asking for anything really, except maybe this. If something in here sat with you, if some part of this felt like something you've been trying to say in a room where you couldn't quite find the words, leave it in the comments. Say whatever it is. I'll read it. Like this if it was worth your time, and subscribe if you want to be here when I tell the next thing. There's always a next thing.